This was probably the most unique review experience I've ever had. See, the whole reason why I got a chance to actually check out this camera is because about a month ago, I made a review over the Canon R3, which is actually the camera I'm using to record this video right now. And when I made that review and I put it out, I said that this was my favorite camera. I love the Canon R3 and that I was literally switching from my last camera to this one. And almost immediately after releasing that video, I got an email from Nikon, and they said that they had a camera that was going to blow me away, that was going to be one of the most superior video cameras on the market. Now, one quick look at my channel, you'll quickly realize two things. One, I have tested and reviewed so many different cameras that to tell me you have one that's gonna blow me away is kind of a big statement. But the second thing you'll probably notice when looking through my channel is that I have never reviewed a Nikon camera. And that's because, well, because I'm video first, honestly, Nikon has always sort of been a joke when it comes to video. I mean, there are memes, there are funny videos, there are entire creators who built a part of their business just making fun of Nikon because they always seem to drop the ball when it comes to video. But Nikon assured me that this was going to be different. However, this camera has a huge issue, and it actually has nothing to do with the camera itself. In terms of video, this camera can shoot at up to a staggering 8K at up to 60 frames per second, and that is in RAW, but it doesn't just stop there. This camera can also shoot in 8K in H.265 at up to 30 frames per second, and then this camera also will give you ProRes internal in 422 at up to 4K, including 4K RAW with ProRes RAW. And again, that's all recorded internally. The HDMI also does support being able to output RAW over HDMI to like a Ninja 5, but this is all built into a camera that if you were to tell me these specs, I would assume you were talking about my $30,000 Red V Raptor. But we're not. We're talking about a $6,000 Nikon. Now, of course, when Nikon sent this camera out to me, my initial thoughts were to test it. So I took it out and I started just playing around with it, seeing what I could get from it, trying a couple of the different formats, whether that was RAW or H.265 or the ProRes, to see which one actually looked the best. I went out and I shot and I tested, and it was after this test that I started to learn a few really important factors. When you go into the settings on this camera, you will notice that there are two options when it comes to RAW. You have normal and you have high. When I looked at the footage side by side, I couldn't really tell that big of a difference, except when it came to the overall storage that it was eating up on the memory card. Not only are the files large themselves, but they are limited as far as like where you can actually use these RAW files. Using the in RAW files, I was only able to actually open up these files in DaVinci Resolve. So if you are a Final Cut Pro 10 editor, well, you're not going to be able to use the RAW setting within this camera. Although you could use the ProRes RAW option, but again, that's only gonna max out at 4K. When I started looking at all the shots side by side, especially on this first test go, I noticed a couple things. One, this camera has a beautiful image. Because you can actually capture everything in log, which is Nikon's own log proprietary format, you do get a lot of range in post. Now, it does have great dynamic range, and I did find that the in-log colors really well. All right, so let me go ahead and pick it back up so I can talk a little bit about the design of this camera. Now, I mentioned earlier that this camera is heavy, and that was honestly my first impression of this camera when I first picked it up. It's just how heavy it is. Now, some people actually like that, and honestly in the past I've said that heavier cameras make it much easier to get stable handheld shots. However, when a camera is as heavy as this one is, it can actually cause some real world issues. For example, whenever I had this camera out and I put the 50mm 1.2 lens on it, which is also a super heavy lens, I then tried to balance that onto my DJI Ronin RS2 and found that it was not balanceable. I then tried to swap out the lens and put on the 24-70, but even with that lens, even though it's a bit lighter than the 50, I found that depending on the actual filter I was using, I still was running into balancing issues. Because of the overall weight of this camera, it can be difficult to balance it on certain gimbals, especially depending on the lens you pair it with. Now, I can say that this lens with the 24-70 no filter balanced without any issues, but I will say it was pushing sort of the threshold that this gimbal can support. Now, putting the overall weight of this to the side, I can say that as far as everything on this camera, as far as the placement, where buttons are, the fact of how many different customizable buttons there are on this camera, I was very pleased with how many different options this camera gives you. I mean, you've got 3 easy to reach function buttons right here in the front. One of my favorite things, it's a small thing, but one of my favorite things is literally where the on-off button is. I can't tell you how comfortable it is to just turn this camera on and off, because whenever you hold a camera like this, your hand just naturally lands here, your finger goes directly to your shutter button, and so your on-off just being right there, it just makes things a little bit easier. So as far as the placement of where everything falls on this camera, I think it's very good. However, there is one other major design flaw with this camera, and it's not really so much as a flaw, but more of just a choice. You know, obviously when Nikon made the Z9, they were looking at video being very important with this camera. And I do believe that the lack of a full swivel screen does hold this camera back for a lot of video shooters. I understand that a lot of people believe that video shooters like having flip out screens because it helps for vlogging, which is true. However, as a professional video shooter, there are times where you are just trying to literally stand in front of the camera where your subject's gonna be, and you wanna make sure that your microphone is not in frame, or you wanna make sure that the lighting looks good, and you wanna be able to see that for yourself by standing in frame. And when your screen doesn't fully swivel around, that's really difficult to do. It means that now you need to bring out a secondary monitor, which just becomes an additional accessory. And when you're running and gunning, that's not always the easiest thing to do. That said, if they didn't go with a full swivel screen, I am glad that we at least have some type of ergonomics with the screen itself. Although it is something, it is a bit unique. I've honestly never had a camera that has a screen that sort of swivels like this. And as cool as it is, when you first start messing around with it, you might think that you're gonna break it, but you're not. It's built really, really well, but it is something that's unique and something you kind of have to get used to. As far as card slots, this camera has 2, not just 1, but 2 CF Express Type B cards, which, you know, as a Canon R3 owner, this is something that I really wish that my R3 had, but it's nice that it's on this camera, which means you literally can just buy one type of memory card and you're good to go. The other benefit is that all of the features that your camera is able to do, you have the right card and card slot in order to pull it off. For example, one of the big benefits of having CF Express Type B card slots on here is the fact that, one, CF Express Type B cards are just technically better than SD cards. They can write much faster and they can actually handle more demand. But the other thing that's nice is that when you have those type of card slots and those type of cards being accepted by your camera, you can do super unique things that are typically only found on cinema cameras. For example, this camera can not only record in RAW to those cards, but at the same time, it can also record a 1080p proxy, which means that if you want to just quickly start editing without having to deal with all of the limitations that those high resolution files are possibly going to add to your computer, you can just start working with those proxies, and it saves you the time of having to create them on your computer later. So as good, great, and wonderful as this camera is, if I'm being 100% honest, this was probably one of the hardest reviews I've ever had to do. The main reason being is that at the heart of this camera, it is a fantastic camera. I mean, it has all of the specs that you could possibly really want out of a nice run and gun camera. I mean, the truth is that if you could take everything that this camera has going for it and you could put that into my Canon R3, that might be the perfect camera for me. However, this camera has a huge issue, and it actually has nothing to do with the camera itself. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, we do have a platform called the Creative Fam Academy, and on that platform, I asked you guys what questions you had about the Nikon Z9. And one of our members, Mark, asked, if someone is in another camera ecosystem, what is a compelling reason one would purchase this camera? Does it do anything other cameras in its price range can't do? Or does it do something better that makes it worth adding to the arsenal? And personally, I thought this was a fantastic question. The main reason being is that if you already are in another ecosystem, does this camera give you something that would make you want to switch or even add it to your ecosystem, knowing that this means that you're gonna have to get new lenses or new accessories and all of these different additions? And this is kind of the hardest thing about this camera. See, when you're buying the $6,000 version of whatever ecosystem camera that you're trying to buy, you are very deep into the ecosystem at that point. And that's why I think this camera is going to struggle. Because if you're a video shooter and you like to shoot Nikon, it's going to be a very challenging road until you get to the Z9. All of the other Nikon cameras that are rocking this new Z mount don't have 10-bit. And in today's world, 10-bit is kind of a basic necessity for any video camera, especially if you plan on doing any grading at all. So the fact that the cameras that lead up to this camera in the ecosystem are so limited, I'm not really sure if there are a lot of people who are going to even consider the Z9, no matter how amazing the specs are, because you literally don't have a solid roadmap up into this camera. So as fantastic as a question as that was for Mark, it really does bring up that very challenging point of what makes someone want to upgrade or purchase a camera. Now, if you'd like to have your question answered just like Mark's in a future video, then definitely go ahead and sign up for the Creative Fam Academy. It is my online educational platform where I answer questions to creators just like you who are looking to enhance their video production journey. Now, it's not just for filmmakers, but it's also for anyone who's interested in content creation. We teach things such as how to compose a shot, lighting, audio, and we also have just added all of the master classes, including how to shoot real estate, how to shoot weddings, and even going into literally everything you need to know when it comes to starting a business in video production. We just updated the entire platform, and so I'm extremely excited with how much more value we are going to be able to provide to any creator who chooses to sign up. You can sign up right now for an annual membership or monthly, but we also do have a membership for those who just want to be a part of the community. For just $5 a month, you can sign up and not only support this channel, but you'll also gain access to that community page where you can ask questions and people like myself, my team, and other members of the Creative Fam Academy can help answer any questions that you might have. So thank you to all of the members who help support this channel over at the Creative Fam Academy. And if you are interested in signing up, definitely check out the links down below in the description. I do believe that for a lot of creators, if you are looking to get the best sensor for the dollar, the Z9 might be the best sensor for the dollar at that $6,000 price point on the market right now. That said, I do believe that for a lot of creators, there's more that goes into that purchase process. It is the ecosystem that you're stepping into. It is some of the functionality things that the camera gives you. And don't get me wrong, this camera gives you pretty much all the functionality you could probably want. But it's the mixture of that ecosystem and the functionality that makes a camera really stand out and allows a creator to feel confident when purchasing it. When Nikon emailed me and said that they were going to be sending me a camera that would rival what my R3 is able to do, and that could possibly be one of the best video cameras on the market in today's time, I honestly was skeptical. But the truth is that it is a phenomenal video camera, and on its own, in a box, in a void, it might be the best camera out in that $6,000 price point. But the truth is that we are not in that box and we don't live in that void. And so as much of a fantastic camera as this is, because of the ecosystem, I don't know if it's a camera that I personally could ever see myself buying. That said, if Nikon is able to somehow build up that ecosystem, which is going to sort of be hard to do because they do have a lot of other cameras on their lineup right now that, as I mentioned, don't have 10-bit. So they'd have to sort of replace a lot of those cameras with upgrades. So I'm not sure what that timeline would look like. But if Nikon is able to do that, then personally, I think that this might be the biggest home run. But as of right now, I personally think that it is the biggest sleeper. But maybe Nikon can catch up. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video and watching all the way to the end. I want to give a huge shout out to all the members of the Creative Fam Academy. Thanks to you guys, this video was actually not sponsored. But if you guys are interested in joining the Creative Fam Academy and getting access to that community page, definitely check out the links down below in the descriptions. Thanks so much. Peace.